Hello. From today onward we are going to start new part 5 of Harry Potter series, that is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Chapter 1, Dudley Demented. The hottest day of the summer so far was drawing to close, and a drowsy silence lay over the large square houses of Private Drive. Cars that were usually gleaming stood dusty in their drives, and lawns that were once emerald green lay parched and yellowish. The use of housepipe had been banned deprived of their usual car washing and lawn mowing pursuit. The inhabitants of Private Drive had retreated into the shade of their cool houses, windows thrown wide in the hope of tempting in the non-existing breeze. The only person left outdoor was a teenage boy who was lying flat on his back in the flower bed outside number 4. He was a skinny, black-haired, bespectacled boy who had the pinched, slightly unhealthy look of someone who has grown a lot in a short space of time. His were torn and dirty, his t-shirt baggy and faded, and the sole of his trainers were peeling away from the upper. Harry Potter's appearance did not endear him to the neighbors, who were the sort of people who thought coffins out to be punishable by law. But as he had hidden himself behind a large hydrangea bush this evening, he was quite invisible to passers-by. In fact, the only way he would be spotted was if his Uncle Vernon or Aunt Putania stuck their head out of the living room window and looked straight down into the flower bed below. On the whole, Harry out, he was to be congratulated on his idea of hiding here. He was not perhaps very comfortable lying on the hard earth, but on the other hand, nobody was glaring at him, grinding their teeth so loudly that he could not hear the news or shooting nasty questions at him. As had happened every time he had tried sitting down in the living room and watching television with his aunt and uncle, almost as though this thought had fluttered through the open window. Vernon Dursley, Harry, uncle suddenly spoke, glad to see the boy stopping time to butt in. Where is he always? I don't know, said Aunt Putania concernedly. But in the house, Uncle Vernon grunted, watching the news, said scantingly, I had like to know what he is really up to, as if the normal boy cares what's on the news. Dudley hasn't got a clue what's going on, but so who the Prime Minister is. Anyways, it's not as if there is had be anything about his lot on our news. Vernon, said Aunt Putania. The window's open. Oh yes, sorry dear. The Dursley fell silent. Harry listened to the jingle about fruit and brown breakfast cereals, while he watches Mrs. Fig as a batty cat-loving old lady from nearby Wisteria Walk ambled slow past. She was frowning and muttering to herself. He was very pleased that he was concealed behind and the bush. Mrs. Fig had recently taken to asking him around for tea whenever she met him in the street. She had rounded the corner and vanished from view before Uncle Vernon's voice floated out of the window again. Dudley's out for tea at the Polkies, said Aunt Putania fondly. He's got so many little friends, he's so popular. Harry repressed a snort of difficulty. The Dursley really very astonishingly stupid about their son. Dudley, they had swallowed all his dim-witted lies about having tea with a different member of his gang every night of the summer holiday. Harry knew perfectly well that Dudley had not been to tea anywhere. He had his gang spent every evening vandalizing the play park, smoking on street corners and throwing stones at passing cars and children. He had seen them at it during the evening walk around Little Winging. He had spent most of the holiday wandering the street, scavenging newspaper from being along the way. The opening note of the music that curdled the 7 o'clock news reached Harry's ear, and his stomach turned over. Perhaps tonight, after a month of waiting, would be the night. Record number of standard holiday mark till airports as the Spanish baggage handlers strike reach its second week. Give them a lifelong siesta. I would, sneered Uncle Vernon over the end of the new leader's sentence. But no matter outside in the flower bed, Harry's stomach seemed to unclench. If anything had happened, it would surely have been the first item of the news. Death and destruction were more important than standard holiday mark. He let out a long, slow breath and started up at the brilliant blue sky. Every day this summer had been the same. The television, expectation, temporary relief, and then mounting tension again, and always growing more instantly all the time. Question of why nothing had happened yet. Keep listening just in case there was some small clue not recognizing for what it really was by the muggles. An unexplained disappearance, perhaps, or some strange accident, but the bagging handler's strike was followed by news on the trot in the southeast. I hope he is listening next door, bellowed Uncle Vernon with his sprinkle on at 3 in the morning. Then a helicopter that had almost crashed in a field in Surrey. Then a famous actress divorced from her famous husband. As if we are interested in their sordid affairs, sniffed Aunt Putania, who had followed the case obsessively in every magazine she could lay her bony hand on. Harry closed his eyes again, and now blazing evening sky as the news leader said, and finally, Bungie, the budgie, has found a novel way of keeping cool this summer. Bungie, who lives at the Five Feather in Barnsley, has learned to water sky. Mary Dawkins went to find out more. Harry opened his eyes again. If they had reached water-sinking Bulgarians, there was nothing else worth hearing. He rolled cautiously onto his front and raised himself onto his knees and elbow, preparing to crawl out from under the window. He had moved about 2 inches, then several things happened in very quick succession. A loud echoing crack broke the sleepy silence like a gunshot. A cat strayed out from under a parked car and flew out of sight. A shriek, a bellowed oath, and the sound of breaking china came from the Dursleys' living room, and as through Harry had been waiting for this signal, he jumped to his feet and at the same time pulling from a waistband of his jean a thin wooden wand as if he were unhitting a sword. But before he could draw himself up to full height, the top of his head collided with Dursley's open window, and the reluctant crash made Aunt Putania scream even louder. Harry felt as if his head had been split in two, eyes streaming, he sweat, trying to focus on the street and spot the source of the noise, but he had barely staggered upright again when two large purple hands reached through the open window and closed tightly around his throat. Put it away, Uncle Vernon said into Harry's ear. Now before anyone see it of me, Harry gasped for a few seconds. He struggled, Harry pulling at his uncle's sausage-like fingers with his left hand, his right maintaining a firm grip on his razor wand. Then as the pain in the top of Harry's head gave a particular nasty throw, Uncle Vernon yelped and released Harry as though he had received an electric shock. Some invisible force seemed to have struck through his nephew, making him impossible to hold. Panting, Harry fell forward over the Hadriga bus, straightened up, and stared around. There was no sign of what had caused the loud cracking noise, but there were several faces peering through various nearby windows. Harry stuffed his wand hastily back into his jeans and tried to look innocent. "Lovely evening," shouted Uncle Vernon, waving at Mrs. Number 7, who was glaring from behind her knit curtain. "Did you hear that car backfired just now? Gave Putania and me quite a turn." He continued to grin in a horrible manic way until all the curious neighbors had disappeared from their various windows. Then the grin became a grimace of rage as he beckoned Harry back toward him. Harry moved a few steps closer, taking care to stop just short of the point at which Uncle Vernon's outstretched hand could resume their struggling. "What the devil do you mean by it, boy?" asked Uncle Vernon in a croaky voice that trembled with fury. "What do I mean by what?" said Harry coldly. He kept looking left and right, up and straight, still hoping to see the person who had made the cracking noise, making a racket like a starting pistol right outside our. "I didn't make that noise," said Harry firmly, and Putania's thin, horsey face now appeared beside Uncle Vernon's white purple one. She looked livid. "Why were you lurking under our window?" he asked Putania. "What were you doing under my window, boy?" "Listen to the news," said Harry in a rising voice. His aunt and uncle exchanged looks of outrage, listening to the news again. "Well, change every day, you see," said Harry. "Don't you be clever with me, boy. I want to know what you are really up to. And don't give me any more of this listening to the news tosh. You know perfectly well that you are not." "Careful, Vernon," breathed Aunt Putania, and Uncle Vernon lowered his voice so that Harry could barely hear him. "That you are a lot. Don't get on our news. That's all you know," said Harry. The Dursley goggled at him for a new second. Then Aunt Putania said, "You are a nasty little liar. What are all those?" She took lowered her voice so that Harry had a lip read the next word. "Owl doing if they are not bringing you news." "Ah," said Uncle Vernon in a triumphant whisper. "Get out of that one, boy, as if we didn't know you get all your news from those pasty little bird." Harry hesitated for a moment. It cost him something to tell the truth this time, even though his aunt and uncle could not possibly know how bad Harry felt at admitting it. "The owls aren't bringing me news," said Harry tonelessly. "I don't believe it," said Aunt Putania at once. "No more do I," said Uncle Vernon forcefully. "We know you are up to something funny," said Aunt Putania. "We are not stupid, you know," said Uncle Vernon. "Well, that's news to me," said Harry, his temper rising, and before the Dursley could call him back, he had wheeled about, crossed the front lawn, stepped over the low grass garden wall, and was striding off up the street. He was in trouble now, and he knew it. He would have to face his aunt and uncle later and pay the price for his rudeness. But he did not care very much just at that moment. He had much more pressing matter on his mind. Harry was sure that the cracking noise had been made by someone apparating or disapparating. It was exactly the sound Dobby, the housewelf, made when he vanished into the air. Was it possibly that Dobby was here in private drive? Could Dobby be following him right at this very moment? As their thought occurred, he wheeled around and stared back down private drive. But it appeared to be completely deserted again, and Harry was sure that Dobby did not know how to become invisible. He walked on, hardly aware of the route he was taking, for he had pounded this street so often lately that his feet carried him to his favorite haunt automatically. Every few steps he glanced back over his shoulder. Someone magical had been nearer him as he lay among Aunt Putania dying begonias. He was sure of it. Why hadn't they spoke to him? Why hadn't they made contact? Why were they hiding now? And then, as his feeling of frustration picked, his certainty leaked away. Perhaps it hadn't been a magical sound after all. Perhaps he was so desperate for a finest sign of contact from the world to which he belonged that he was simply overreacting to perfectly ordinary noise. Could he be sure it hadn't been the sound of something breaking inside neighbor's house? Harry felt a dull, sinking sensation in his stomach, and before he knew it, the feeling of hopelessness that had clung him all summer rolled over him once again. Tomorrow morning he would be awoke by alarm at 5 o'clock so that he could pay the owl that delivery, the daily profit. But was there any point in continuing taking? Harry merely glanced at the front page before throwing it aside disgust. When the idiot who ran the paper finally realized that Voldemort was back, it would be headline news, and that was the only kind Harry cared about. If he was lucky, there would also be Owl carrying letter from his best friend Ron and Hermione through any expectation he had had that their letter would bring him news had long since been dashed. Can't say much about you know what, obviously. We have been told not to say anything important in case our letter go astray. We are quite busy, but I can't give you details here. There is a fair amount going on. Well, tell everything to you when we see you. But when we are going to see him, nobody seemed too bothered with a precise date. Harmony had scribbled, I expect we'll be seeing you quite soon, inside his birthday card. But how soon was soon? As far as Harry could tell from the vague hint in their letter, Hermione and Ron were in the same place, presumably at Ron's parents' house. He could hardly bear to think of pair of them having fun at Woodend when he was stuck in private drive. In fact, he was so angry at them what he had thrown both their birthday present of honey-dunk chocolates away unopened, though he had regretted this after eating the wilting salad Aunt Putania had provided for dinner that night. Were Ron and Hermione busy with? Why hasn't he, Harry busy, hadn't he proved himself capable of handling much more than they could? They all forgot he had done. Hadn't it been he who re-entered the graveyard and watched Cedric being murdered and been tired that Tom Stone had nearly killed? Don't think about that, he told himself sternly for the 100th time that summer. It was bad enough that he had revisited the graveyard in the nightmares without dwelling on it in his waking moments too. Turned to a corner into Magnolia Crescent. Halfway along he passed a narrow alleyway down the side of the garage where he had first clapped eyes on his godfather. Cyrus at least seemed to understand how Harry was feeling. Admittedly, his letters were just as empty of the proper news as Ron and Hermione's, but at least they contained words of caution and consolidation instead of tantalizing hints. I know this must be frustrating for you. Keep your nose clean and everything will be okay. Be careful and don't do anything rash. Well, though, Harry, as he crossed Magnolia Crescent, turned into Magnolia Road and headed toward the darkening played park. He had done as Cyrus advised. He had at least revisited the temptation to tie his trunk to his broomstick and set off for the burrow by himself. In fact, Harry thought his behavior had been very good considering how frustrated and angry he felt at being stuck in private drive this long, reduced to hiding in flatbed in the hope of hearing something that might point to what Lord Voldemort was doing. Nevertheless, it was quite galling to be told not to be rash by a man who had served 12 years in the wizard prison. Azkaban escaped, attempting to commit the murder he had been convicted for in the first place, then gone on the run with the stolen hippogriff. Harry vaulted over the locked park gate and set off across the park's grass. The park was as empty as the surrounding street. He reached the swing he banked onto, the only one that Dudley and his friend had not yet managed to break. He laid one arm around the chain and stared moodily at the ground. He would not be able to hide in Dudley's flower bed again. Tomorrow he would have to think of some fresh way of listening to the news. In the meantime, he had nothing to look forward to but another restless, disturbed night because even when he escaped nightmares about Cedric, he had unsettling dreams about long dark corridor, all finishing in day's end and locked door, which he supposed had something to do with that feeling he had when he was awake. Often the old scar on his forehead pricked uncomfortably, but he did not fool himself that Ron or Hermione or Cyrus would find that very interesting anymore. In the past, his hurting had warned that Voldemort was getting stronger again, but now that Voldemort was back, they would probably remind him that its regular irritation was only to be expected, nothing to worry about, old news. The injustice of it all welled up inside him so that he wanted to yell with fury. If it hadn't been for him, nobody would even have known Voldemort was back. His reward was to be stuck in Little Winning for 4 solid weeks, completely cut off from the magical world, reduced to squatting among dying begonias so that he could hear about waters kicking bulgarians. How could Dumbledore have forgotten him so easily? Why had Ron and Hermione got together without inviting him along too? How much longer had he supposed to endure Cyrus telling him to sit tight and be a good boy? Or resist the temptation to write to the stupid Daily Prophet and point out that Voldemort had written these furious thoughts whirl around in Harry's head and his inside written with anger as slutty 12 night fell around him. The air full of smell of warm, dry grass, and the only sound that of the low grumble of traffic on the road beyond the park railing. He did not know how long he had sat on the swing before the sound of voice interrupted his musing and he looked up. The street lamps from the sounding road were casting a misty glow strong enough to light out a group of people making their way across the park. One of them was singing a loud, crude song, the other were laughing. A soft, tickling voice coming from several expensive racing bikes that way they were wheeling along. Harry knew who those people were. The figure in front of was unmistakably his cousin, Dudley Dursley, making his way home accompanied by his faithful gang. Dudley was as vast as ever, but a year's hard dieting and the discovery of a new talent had wrought quite a change in his physique. As Uncle Werner politely told anyone who would listen, Dudley had recently become a junior heavyweight inter-school boxing champion of the Southeast. The noble sport, as Uncle Vernon called it, had made Dudley even more formidable than he had seemed to Harry in the primary school days when he had served as Dudley's first punching bag. Harry was not remotely afraid of his cousin anymore, but he still didn't think that Dudley learning to punch harder and more accurately was cause for celebration. Neighborhood children all around were terrified of him, even more terrified than they were of that Potter boy, who they had been warned was a hundred hulling who attend St. Bruto's secure center for incurable criminal boys. Harry watched the dark figure crossing the grass and wondered whom they had been beating up tonight. around, Harry found himself thinking as he watched them. Come on, look around. I'm sitting here all alone. Come and have a go. Dudley's friends saw him sitting here. They would be sure to make a billing for him. And what would Dudley do then? He wouldn't want to lose face in front of the gang, but he had terrified of provoking Harry. It would be really fun to watch Dudley's dilemma, to taunt him, watch him with him powerless to respond, and if any of the other tried to hitting Harry, Harry was ready. He had his wand, let them try. He had loved to vaunt some of his frustration on the boys who had once made his life hell. But they did not turn around. They did not see him. They were almost at the railing. Harry mastered the impulse to call them after them. Seeking the fight was not smart move. He must not use magic. He would be risking explosion again. Dudley's gang was side. They were out of sight, heading along Mongolian Road. There you go, Cyrus. Harry told Dudley nothing rash. I know, clean, exactly the opposite of what you had have done. Got to his feet and stretched. Aunt Putania and Uncle Vernon seemed to feel that whatever Dudley turned up was the right time to be home, and any time after that was much too late. Uncle Vernon had threatened to lock Harry in the shed if he came home after Dudley again. So, stifling a yawn, still scrawling, Harry set off toward the park gate. Mongolian Road, like private drive, was full of large square houses with perfectly manicured lawns, all owned by large square owners who drove very clean cars similar to Uncle Vernon's. Harry preferred little winging by night when curtain window made punch of jewel bright color of the darkness, and he ran no danger of hearing disapproving muttered about his delinquent appearance when he passed the householders. He walked quiet so that halfway along Mongolian Road Dudley gang came into view again. They were saying their farewells at the entrance to Mongolian Crescent. Harry stepped into the shadow of a large lime tree and waited. Squealed again a pig, didn't he? Malcolm was saying to Guffleway from the others. Nice right hook, Big D, said Piers. Same time tomorrow, said Dudley. Round at my place, my parents were out, said Gordon. See you then, said Dudley. Bye, Dud, see you, Big D. Harry waited for the rest of gang to move on before setting off again. When their voices had faded once more, he headed around the corner into Mongolian Crescent, and by walking very quickly, he soon came within healing distance of Dudley, who was strolling along at his ears, humping turnless. Hey, Big D, Dudley turned. Oh, he grunted, it's you. How long you have been? Big D then, said Harry. Shut it, sneered Dudley, turning away. Full name, said Harry, grinning and falling into step beside his cousin. But you'll always be equal, did Kish to me. I said, shut it, said Dudley, whose hamp-like hand had curled into face. Don't the boys know that's what you are, Mom calls you? Shut your face. You don't tell her to shut her face. What about Pumpkin and Dickie, the dumps? Can I use them then? Dudley said nothing. The effort of keeping himself from hitting Harry seemed to be demanding all his self-control. So, who have you been beating up tonight? Harry asked, his grin fading. Another 10-year-old. I know you did, Mark Evans 2 nights ago. He was asking for it, sneered Dudley. Oh yeah, he chicked me. Yeah, did he say you look like a pig that been caught to walk on his hind legs? Cause that's not cheek, Dud, that's true. A muscle was twitching in Dudley's jaw. It gave Harry enormous satisfaction to know how furious he was making Dudley. He felt as though he was siphoning off his own frustration into his cousin, the only outlet he had. They turned right down the narrow alleyway where Harry had first seen Cyrus, and which formed a shortcut between Mongolia Crescent and Wisteria Walk. It was empty, and much darker than the street it linked because there were no street lamp. Their footsteps were muffled between garage wall on one side and high fence on the other. Think you are a big man carrying that thing, don't you? Dudley said after a few seconds. What thing? That thing you are hiding. Harry grinned again. Not as stupid as you look you are, you dude. But I suppose if you were, you wouldn't be able to walk and talk at the same time. Harry pulled out his wand. He saw Dudley look sideways at it. You are not allowed, Dudley said at once. I know you are not. You had the spell from that How do you know they haven't changed the rules, Big D? They haven't, said Dudley. Though he didn't sound completely convinced, Harry laughed softly. You haven't got the guts to take me on without that thing, have you? Dudley sneered. Whereas you just need your matters behind you before you can beat up a 10-year-old. You know that boxing literally you keep banging on about. How old was your opponent? 7, 8. He was 16, for your information, sneered Dudley, and he was out cold for 20 minutes. I finished with him, and he was twice as heavy as you. You just wait till I tell Dad you had that thing out. Turning to Dudley now, are you? Is his equal boxing champion frightened of nasty Harry's wand? God is brave at night. Are you sneered Dudley? This is night. It Kinch. That's what we call it when it goes all dark. Think this. I mean, when you are in bed, Dudley sneered. He had stopped walking. Harry stopped too, starting his cousin. From the little he could see of Dudley's large face, he was wearing a strangely triumphant look. What do you mean? I'm not brave in bed, said Harry completely nonplussed. But I'm supposed to be frightened, kilo or something. I heard you last night, said Dudley breathless, talking in your sleep. Morning. What do you mean? Harry said again. But there was a cold, plunking sensation in his stomach. He had revisited graveyard last night in his sleep. Dudley gave a harsh bark of laughter, then adopted a high-pitched whimpering voice. Don't kill Cedric, don't kill Cedric. Who's Cedric? Your boyfriend? Aye, you're lying, said Harry automatically. But his mouth had gone dry. We knew Dudley wasn't lying. How else would he know about Cedric? Dad, help me. Dad, he's going to kill me, Dad. Boo. Shut up, said Harry quietly. Shut up, Dudley. I'm warning you. Come and help me, Dad. Mom, come and help me. He killed Cedric. Dad, help me. He's going to. Don't you point that thing at me. Dudley back into the alley wall. He was pointing the wand directly at Dudley's heart. Harry could feel 14 years hatred of Dudley's pounding in his veins. What wouldn't be given the strike now to jinx Dudley so thoroughly he had have to crawl home like an insect, stump dumb, sprouting fillers. Don't ever talk about that again, Harry snarled. Do you understand me? Point that thing somewhere else. I said, do you understand me? Point it somewhere else. Do you understand me? Get that thing away from. Dudley gave an odd, sudden gasp, as though he had been dashing in icy water. Something had happened to the night. The stars' true indigo sky was suddenly pitch black and lightless. Stars, the moon, the misty dim place at either end of the alley had vanished. The distant grum of cars and his whisper of tree has gone. The balmy evening was suddenly piercing, biting cold. They were surrounded by total, imperturbable, silent darkness, as though some giant hand had dropped a thick icy mantle over the entire alleyway, blinding them for a split second. Harry thought he had done magic without meaning to, despite the fact that he had been resisting as hard as he could. Then His reason caught up and his sense he didn't have the power to turn off the stars. He turned his head this way and that, trying to see something, but the darkness pressed on his eyes like a weightless well. Dudley's terrified voice broke in Harry's ear. What are you doing? Stop it. I'm not doing anything. Shut up and don't move. I can't see. I have gone blind. I I said shut up. Harry stood shock still, turning his slight eyes left and right. The cold was so intense that he was shivering all over. Goosebumps had erupted up his arm, and the hairs on the back of his neck were standing up. He opened his eyes to their fullest extent, starting blackly around unseen. It was impossible. They couldn't be here. Not in little winking. He strained his ears. He would hear them before he saw them. I'll tell Dad, Dudley whimpered. Where are you? What are you doing? Will you shut up? Harry hissed. I'm trying to listen. But he fell silent. He had heard just a thing he had been dreading. There was something in his alleyway apart from themselves, something that was drawing long, hoarse, rattled breath. Harry felt a horrible jolt of dream as he stood trembling in the freezing air. Put it out, stop it. I'll hit you, I swear I will. Dudley shut. Bomb first made contact with the side of Harry's head, lifting Harry straight. Small white light popped in front of his eyes. For the second time in the hearts, he felt as though his head had been cleaned in two. Next moment he had landed hard on the ground and his wand had flown out of his hand. You moron, Dudley! Harry yelled, his eyes watering pain. He scrambled to his hands and knees, now feeling around frantically in the blackness. He heard Dudley blundering away, hitting the alley fence, screaming, Dudley, come back! You are running right at it! There was a horrible squealing yell, and Dudley's footsteps stopped. At the same moment, Harry felt a creeping chill behind him. That could mean only one thing. There was more than one. Dudley, keep your mouth shut. Whatever do you? Keep your mouth shut. Wand. Harry muttered frantically, his wand flying over the ground like a spider. There won't come on. Lumos. He said the spell automatically, desperately for light to help him in his search, and to his disbelief relief, light flattered inches from the right hand. The wand tide had ignited. Harry snatched it up, scrambled to his feet, and turned around. His stomach turned over. A towering hooded figure was gliding smooth toward him, hovering over the ground. No feet or face visible beneath his robe, sucking on the night as it came stumbling backward. Harry raised his wand, expecto patronum. A silver wisp of vapor shot from the tip of the wand, and the Dementor slowed, but the spell hadn't worked properly, tripping over his face. Harry retreated farther as the Dementor bore down upon him, panic fogging his brain once concentrated. A pair of grey, slimy scabbard hands slid from inside the Dementor robe, reaching for him. A rushing noise filled Harry's ear, expecto patronum. His voice sounded dim and distant. Another wisp of silver smoke, flavored than the last, drifted from the wand. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't work the spell. There was laughter inside his own head, shrill, high-pitched laughter. He could smell the Dementor breath, filling his own lungs, drawing him, think something happy. But there was no happiness in him. The Dementor's icy fingers were closing on his throat. The high-pitched laughter was growing louder and louder, and a voice spoke inside his head. Go to that, Harry. It might even be painless. I would not know. I never died. He was never going to see Ron and Hermione again, and their faces burst clearly into his mind, and the thought of breath, expecto patronum, an enormous silver stag erupted from the tip of Harry's wand. He silently caught the Dementor in the place where the heart should have been. It has thrown backward, weightless and darkness, and as the stag charged, the Dementors swooped away, battle like the defeat. This way, Harry shouted at the stage. Wheeling around, he sprinted down the alleyway, holding his lit wand aloft. Dudley, Dudley, he had run barely a dozen steps when he reached them. Dudley was cold on the ground, his arm clapped over his face. A second Dementor was crouching lower over him, gripping his wrist in his slimy hand, prising them slowly, almost lovingly apart, lowering its hooded head toward Dudley's face as get back to kiss him. Get it? Harry bellowed, and with a rushing, roaring sound, the silver stag he had conjured came galloping back past him. The Dementor's eyeless face was barely an inch from Dudley's when the silver antlers caught it. The thing was thrown up into the air, and like its fellow, it soared away and was absorbed into the darkness. The stars centered to the end of the alleyway and dissolved into silver mist. Moon, star, and strip lamp burst back into life. A warm breeze swept into alleyway, trees rustling in neighborhood garden, and the modern rumble of cars in Mongolia Crescent filled the air again. Harry stood quite still, and his sense vibrating, taking in abrupt return to normality. After a moment, he became aware that his t-shirt was sticking to him. He was drenched in sweat. He could not believe that had just happened. Dementor here, a little winging. Dudley lay curled up on the ground, whimpering and shaking. Harry bent down to see whether he was in a fit state to stand up, but then heard loud running footsteps behind him. Instinctively raising his wand, the spun on his heel to the newcomer, Miss Fig. Their batty old neighbor came panting into sight. Her gazing grey hair was escaping from the hairnet. A clanking steel shopping bag was swinging from her waist, and her feet were halfway out of her tattered carpet slippery. Harry made to show his wand hurriedly out of sight. But don't put it away, idiot boy, she shrieked. What if there are more of them around? Oh, I'm going to kill Mordgus Fletcher. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.